的一个衡量，就实现了力学上分散重量这一个原理。这样就最大程度的增加了柱与柱之间的这种跨度，减了这个若干传统意义上的这些立柱，实现了大殿内部的这种空间的这种宽阔。
The Liao dynasty architects called the technique pillar reduction. Detailed records were kept and the technique was applied in many later wooden structures.
对，顶到梁，在那个最上面。出兵是吧？这以后9米多，大概那3层楼的高。3层楼还多呢，梁找。
One essential requirement was the use of high-quality timber. All the pillars in the Mahavira Hall at Fengguo Temple are over 70 centimeters in diameter, and the biggest is 9.5 meters tall. Each was shaped from a single tree trunk, and none has developed any cracks after nearly 1,000 years.
说这我们丰宫寺吧，按民间说传法说9981间，9981间呢，每一间就应该有4个柱子。实际上呢，这个9981间它只用了20根粗大的立柱，其他的都剪掉了。剪掉作用呢，就是为了增大殿内的这种活动的空间，增加人们的视野那种开阔感。
There are 28 columns inside the walls of the hall as reinforcement. In the middle of the hall are 28 columns. But in reality, there were only 20 instead of 28 when it was first built. The extra 8 were added later on, as we can see that 2 columns in front of the main entrance and 6 in the middle row of the hall are apparently thinner. Perhaps you may ask, what are the benefits to reduce the number of columns? Well, first of all, it needed a relatively open space for carrying out religious activities there. The extra pillars would have been highly inconvenient. A stone shelf is set up before the giant statues of the Buddha. On it were placed the implements of worship. But it also functions as a fence, marking out the space for ceremonies. The addition of extra pillars would have distributed the spatial division. Moreover, the omission of the pillars also had another benefit. If you step inside the Mahavira Hall upon a time of sunset, you'll see the giant Buddhas apparently smiling in the setting sun. This is another contrivance of the architects. The sun showers the temple with sunshine every day. When we enter the Mahavira Hall with the sun on our backs, the statues and the hall are all very well lit. We may presume that if the number of columns hadn't been reduced, the sunlight would come from the entrance and the columns would have had huge shadows on them. With the movement of the sun, the shadows would move too, thus obstructing the view. No doubt the architects considered the sunlight very carefully before they decided to limit their use of pillars. Although the column reducing method can reduce the number of columns magically, it's not a panacea. There was another difficult problem lying ahead for the workmen, a problem greater than the columns. In putting the 7 giant Buddhas in place, the architects discovered that the width of the hall was not the only problem they faced. Such was the statue's size that they could not be installed after the hall was completed. That requires the vertical space to be enlarged to 21 meters in order to sculpture the Buddhist statues. In architectural design, pillars are generally arranged symmetrically in order to achieve maximum stability. However, the architects broke away from conventional forms in the Mahavira Hall of Fengguo Temple. They did so in order to make the temple more functional. The main pillar in the hall was moved further inward to achieve a more spacious effect. Rows of pillars were set up beside the giant Buddhas to form a narrow rectangle protecting them. The ceiling above the rectangle around the giant Buddhas is clearly different in its structure from the ceiling at the front of the hall. The former is much higher and the beam structure is different. Each statue occupies a stall, which is little wider than the statue itself. The statues are also closely grouped. Behind the giant statues of the Buddha, the line of pillars produces a corridor against the wall just wide enough to guarantee a clear and full view of the wall paintings. Clearly, the architects calculated very carefully when they moved the pillar inward.
那么凤寺大雄宝殿，它呢为了这个能够适应这个面阔9间。 进深5间这么大的一个体量的一个木构建筑，那么它呢，在佛像所处的位置，那么它就改变了一些传统的一些做法，形成自己那种独特的这个创新。
Despite the limited technical conditions at the time, the architects were able to incorporate all the functions of a temple. They managed to house 7 giant Buddha statues in one hall, yet left sufficient room for holding religious ceremonies there too. But they didn't stop there. They managed to do something even more remarkable with the pillars. By hanging a vertical thread from the top, we can see that the pillars in front of the statues are not vertical. But why would they be leaning?
整个凤寺大雄宝殿，它的外檐柱和殿内的里面这个支撑的力度都是相对倾斜的，外边的倾斜度比较大，里面的倾斜度比较小。
This is just another feature of ancient Chinese wooden architecture. Common optical illusions were also taken into account when the pillars were erected. Our eyes often succumb to illusions. When we are beside a high wall, it seems to lean towards us. The case is the same with the tall pillars and the giant Buddhas. So this line of parallel pillars would naturally appear to bend outwards. The architects were apparently aware of this and arranged the pillars to lean slightly inwards in front of the statues. Therefore, the reflection points on the pillars are altered and the illusion is corrected. But does the lean affect the pillar's ability to support weight? In fact, the incline is slight, only 13 centimeters, so the influence on their strength is negligible. Still, the architects incorporated two further protective measures into the pillars. The first was the pillar protector. The pillar protectors are sections of wood that are closely attached to the pillars. They're used on the pillars in front of the giant statues of the Buddha. Each measures 20 to 30 centimeters, and they stabilize the pillars while not affecting the spatial effect within the hall. The second protective measure is provided by the pillar bases. It's a mill-like piece of carved granite with a diameter at the bottom measuring 1.1 meters. The pillar bases are not laid inside the ground, but just placed flat on it. Why didn't they put the pillar bases inside the ground? They didn't because this method can increase resistance to earthquakes. The 3-meter-high rammed basement of the hall provides a solid base. When an earthquake strikes, the solid basement weakens the seismic waves. As the pillar bases are placed on the ground, they may rock with the seismic waves without being deformed or broken.
那么石柱础和这个立柱，它们俩这种结合，又是实的，又是虚的，也又减少了一些来自外力的这种冲击。所以呢，作为说古代这个劳动人民，这个匠人是非常聪明的，他们利用了很多这种拿现在来说是科学的这一些力学这个原理。
The pillar bases not only serve a practical function, they also, in their decorative patterns, such as lotus leaves, peonies, and grass, enhance the sense of beauty. They also testify to the outstanding skill of the ancient craftsmen. Though the glory of the Mahavira Hall of Fengguo Temple has faded over the past 1,000 years, it still reveals a great deal about the wisdom of our ancient ancestors. Today, using three-dimensional laser scanning equipment combined with traditional manual measurement, Chinese scientists have obtained a 3D point cloud model of the hall. This provides a scientific basis for more detailed analysis and research in the future. And as the studies of Fengguo Temple go deeper, it seems certain that more mysteries will be revealed and solved.